before we started this, one of the questions that was posed to me was, what contest is the least favorite in Toastmasters? Well, I said Tall Tales from a district perspective. I mean, districts don't put on Tall Tales that often. The other four, all the time. Some districts have never done Tall Tales. Some districts are doing Tall Tales for the very first time just in the last couple of years. And I firmly believe the reason is nobody knows what a tall tale is. What constitutes a tall tale? Well, somebody else asked what a short tale was. And I think that can help define what a tall tale is, because a short tale is basically the truth. It's what really happened. It doesn't take very long to say what really happened. I mean, when you get caught in a lie, the lie takes forever to tell. You have too many details to remember, and then you're just toast. So be careful about your lies. You don't want to be telling tall tales. You want to be telling short tales, unless the short tale is something you don't want people to know, I suppose. A tall tale would be the opposite of the truth. The question is, how opposite? And what do you include in a tall tale? Well, if you look it up, because, we got to do the whole, well, what does it say in the dictionary about tall tales? Yeah, well, they say it's a myth, could be a legend, a fable, a parable, a fish story, could be a ghost story. Now think about some of the big myths and fables you've heard, like Paul Bunyan. If you're in America, you've heard about Paul Bunyan. That's a myth or a fable of a giant lumberjack who, well, no, he wasn't a giant. His ox was giant, the giant blue ox, Babe. And they would go around chopping trees down and changing the course of mighty rivers. It's an Old West tall tale. Then you've got Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed went around the United States planting apple trees. Except he really existed. There really was a Johnny Appleseed. But the stories about him grew so large that it became a tall tale, even though it was based on truth. I know, obviously, in other parts of the world, each country, each culture has their own tall tales. And usually, if they're popular enough, they get turned into Disney movies. So when you're watching, what's the one about the gal fighting Genghis Khan, imitating a guy because she couldn't be a girl in the army? Anybody know? Mulan. Right. Yes, that's based on truth, I believe, but it's become a tall tale over the years. So think about that. Telling a true story can be a way to go. I have a friend who told a true story in Tall Tales that had him meeting somebody famous. And it was kind of an unbelievable story, but since it really happened, it was believable enough to not be unbelievable and not work as a tall tale eventually. He's a good enough speaker that he was able to go through a couple of rounds, but then he got stopped by a real fish story. Somebody talking about, oh, I caught the giant fish, and then it took me here and it took me there and traveled the world. That's taking something that is kind of expected. I caught a fish. Oh, it was a big fish. But then that big fish suddenly grabs you in its mouth and takes you on a tour around the world. That stretches it to the point of a tall tale. And if you can make it entertaining, somewhat interesting, beyond just the basic, I got kidnapped by a fish, which is, I don't know how basic that is, but that's where it starts. Where does it lead? Where does your tall tale lead you and your audience? And then where does it land? Now, some people could say, well, there are a lot of known stories, but of course you can't tell a known story because it's not original, and you will get disqualified if you don't tell an original story. Although these days it's tough to tell what's an original story and what's just chat, whatever, CGP, CGT, whatever the AI is out there. Please stay away from that. But for example, maybe if you told a story about Batman, you couldn't really get away with it because, Batman's fairly well known. And we have no idea if that story is a story somebody else has written or not. But if you tell a story about how you met Batman, maybe you saved Batman's life, maybe you stood in for Batman and spent a night fighting crime. Okay, well, then you're getting into tall tale territory. Yes, you're using a known franchise element, but you're not stealing it so much as enhancing it, embellishing it. Not necessarily my first choice, but if you're getting stuck, maybe start with that and then change the character by the time you actually think of the speech and the time you deliver it. So it maybe it's a starting point, a jumping off point. I want to go and share with you my first Tall Tales district winning speech, just so that we can kind of get a baseline of what one type of Tall Tale speech is. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go to this one. And you should see a guy in a gray suit. And hopefully you're going to hear sound.
Rich Hopkins. Rich Hopkins. It's got to be the shoes. It's got to be the shoes. Rich Hopkins. How do you define courage? Is it the absence of fear, or is it the ability to act despite it? I want you to meet Willie Winkle Williams. He lived all of his adult life in a basement apartment in a brownstone building on Main Street in the small city of Bigville in Pawcatawny County, Tennessee. Now, Willie was afraid of everything. Every squeak, every creak, every sudden appearance of a shadow. He didn't go out. He didn't do anything. He ordered everything, from his groceries to his boxer shorts to his Old Spice soap on a rope, from introvert.com. Only once a day at precisely 3:33 p.m. would he venture out to take a walk around his block. When he'd step out of that front door of his building, he'd always hear, "Hi, Willie!" And he knew it was Sally, the little girl who just moved in a few months ago across the street. But he could never look up, just look down at his shoes, take his walk around the block. Now, the day came, and he looked down at his shoes, and his toes were looking right back up at him. He'd worn them clean through, and he knew it was time to order some more. So he headed over to his computer. He started to search, and an ad seemed to call to him from the intrawebs. his Dr. Lightfoot Super Deluxe Triple Tread athletic shoes that'll make you fly. And he knew he had to have them. So he hit that order button, and 4 to 6 weeks later, a box appeared at his door. The contents inside seemed to glow. Carefully opened it up, pulled out the most beautiful pair of tennis shoes he had ever seen. He could hardly wait till 3:33 p.m. He headed out, again walking out the front door of his building. Hey, Willie! Still, he couldn't look up. He just started to take his walk. But this day, suddenly he got hit, and a man was running past him, and he heard from behind shouts, "Stop that man! Stop that man! He's got my purse!" And before Willie knew what was going on, the shoes seemed to move for him, and he started chasing after him. They tackled the man, held him there until the policeman asked him, "How ever did you do this?" And all Willie could do was look down. "I don't know. It's got to be the shoes." Every day thereafter, his walks around the block became more of an adventure. He started pushing senior citizens out of the way of speeding cars, catching falling pianos before they collapsed on the public below, and yes, naturally, saving cats from the tallest tree limbs in town. Every time they'd ask him, "How did you do it?" he just looked down. "I don't know. It's got to be the shoes." One fateful morning, he woke up to screams and sirens. He dashed out of his building and looked up, and there was Sally screaming in terror, her building in flames. He ran across, knocking firemen out of the way, going up the stairs, crashing through the apartment door, grabbed Sally and jumped out the window. Luckily, to the waiting arms of the firemen below. While still holding Sally, the fire chief said, "How did you do it?" He looked down and just said, "I don't know. It's got to be the..." But of course, his feet were bare. He'd been so panicked, he left them at home. And everyone from that day forward knew in the small city of Bigville in Pocatawny County, Tennessee, that courage did not come from the supposedly superpowered soles of his shoes, but from the superiority and strength of the soul of the man who wore them.
All right. Wow, I haven't seen that in a long time. I believe that was 2016, fall of 2016. Believe it or not, I gave a version of that speech in 2003 at a Tall Tales contest, got up to division and lost at division to the story about a man hunting a bear. So, you know, I put that story in mothballs, and then when my district here, I was in Utah then, I'm in Denver, Colorado now, and the district here decided to bring Tall Tales back. So I thought, well, let's pull that out of the mothballs and see what I can do to it to make it better. And sure enough, it got better and won the whole thing. And afterwards, the gal who came in second, who was a good friend of mine, who I coached a little bit on her own Tall Tale, and "I can't believe you won with that. That wasn't even funny." See, and it wasn't. There were only maybe 3 major laughs throughout the entire speech. It was not funny. It was a moral-driven story. So it was more of a parable than it was a humorous speech. And when I look back my inspirations for that speech go back to being a kid and reading comic books. There was a character named Amazing Man who had giant shoes. They weren't super powered, but they looked like they ought to be. Ray Bradbury in Dandelion Wine wrote a short story about a kid who desperately wanted a pair of tennis shoes because it made him feel fresh and new, like he could run faster than he ever could before. And I've always carried that story with me. But you couldn't really identify either of those sources by just watching that speech. I just know that they came from different cracks of my brain when I started writing the tall tale over the years. So there's exaggeration, there was strong description, there was contrast. I mean, just using this small city of Bigville, and then in an outrageous place, Pawcatawny County, Tennessee. That I think that's actually a real county. I don't know if it's in Tennessee or not, but it sounds funny. And that's the thing, is you want to sound funny, even if you're not going to get a laugh. It can just sound odd and it'll stick with people. It'll be entertaining. The brownstone building. Hopefully people could see that in their mind of the type of building he was in. One of my mistakes back then was I said 4 to 6 weeks shipping. That's what it was when I told the tall tale in 2003. I should have said overnight shipping in 2016. But, what are you going to do? So that particular tall tale is one of my favorites, just one of my favorites. And part of it is because it had a point. And if you listen to speakers long enough, you're going to hear a lot of tall tales that they're sort of passing off as short tales, but are really tall tales because they want to make a point. One of the most famous, the starfish story. You ever heard the starfish story? You got the kid and his dad walking along the beach, and there's starfish all over the beach, dried out. And the kid starts picking them up one by one, throwing them back into the ocean. The father's like, why are you doing that? You could never possibly pick up all those starfish. Well, no, Dad, but at least I've saved that one. See, you get the nice little point. Story probably never happened, but it's a cool little story and it makes a point that you can at least help one person. And if you just help one person, you've made a difference. Heck, we hear that as speakers all the time. You can be talking to 3,000 people, and if you've changed the life of just one of them, you have succeeded. Well, let's hope you change the life of at least 2, though. I mean, come on, 3,000 people and only one? We'll see. Then you got the story about the guy who was outside and he was homeless. And he got himself put into a freezer train car. So a refrigerated train car for shelter, except he didn't know that it was a refrigerated train car until he got inside and the door shut behind him, trapping him there. And he realized he was going to freeze to death. All night long, he just sat in the corner, praying and praying that he would survive, but knowing he would not. The police found him the next day, dead, frozen in the corner of that train car. But that train car wasn't working. The refrigerator unit didn't work, but he had believed it to be so, and so he made his result happen. He made what he thought was going to happen occur, because thoughts are things. Okay, thoughts really are things, but that story is not provable. I have looked all over the internet for some sort of corroboration on that particular story. No, it's a tall tale, but it makes a point. Speakers love to tell those types of stories. The question is can you still get away with it? In the 80s, Zig Ziglar would tell those stories. Les Brown can tell those stories. But can you get away with it in 2023? I'm thinking not so much. I think we have a more cynical audience out there. So it's not necessarily that you can't tell the story, but you need to be careful about how you present it, whether or not you're presenting it as truth or you're presenting it as a parable, a fable, something that makes a point, but you aren't trying to pass it off as true. And in general, if you're giving a regular speech, motivational speech, informational speech, if you're giving stories that aren't true to make a point, it can take away your credibility. So you might want to stick with some of these stories and only use them in the tall tales contest. But that's up to you. You know, a lot of these stories I don't tell just because they've been told for so many decades. So people have heard them. But then every group I tell those stories to, I find that less than half have actually heard them. I think they've heard them. That's called the curse of knowledge, because I've heard them. And a lot of Toastmasters study speakers, so they've heard them. But we get a new generation every 10 years who've never heard them. So you can get away with telling them, and people will be entertained to a point. So you kind of have to use your own judgment there. But let's go back to actual tall tales now that I've given you my caveat emptor in terms of using these types of stories in the real world, in a real situation. Tall tales, you can do whatever you want, as long as you don't retell one of those stories that somebody's going to say, wow, thanks for telling us the Zig Ziglar story or the chicken soup for the soul story that I read 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Now you want to come up with something new. Let's take a look, just for kicks and giggles, or however that goes, at the judging sheet. Where is the judging sheet? Come on. See, this is what happens when you have too many windows open. Oh, there we go. Show all windows. Well, it's a good thing I got 90 minutes, isn't it?
District 101 is going to have this contest, and study group, you are in there. Contest chair, do you have a copy of the Tall Tales ballot?
I have it up. I have it up in my PDF. Why is it not there?
Because Murphy took over.
Murphy took over. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to unshare. Or I don't think I'm actually sharing yet. Okay, well, it's gone. Why is it gone? See, I hate it when I listen to a presenter doing exactly what I'm doing. I get really, really upset with them.
Yeah. Well, Karen pulled it up. Karen pulled it up.
Here it is.
Yes.
Thank you, Karen.
What, would you like me to screen share it?
Nope, I got it.
Okay.
So you should be able to see it.
Mhm.
And I should be able to read it when I put on my glasses. So take a look at this. Speech development is the biggest part. And that's not always the case in these contests. So what's your opening? Build up. What are you building up to? So you may have an opening that gets your attention, but then it has to get bigger and bigger, get to a climax that maybe has a twist in it, which comes up later. Is your speech organized like a speech should be? How smooth is it? I had some hiccups in that particular speech I just showed you, but I was able to get through it. Speech techniques, effective use of exaggeration, irony. Are you using any puns? Puns, which are the lowest form of humor, but in tall tales, people like puns. Surprise twists, the very end, when he realizes he doesn't have the superpowered shoes. That's the big one that gets people. Is there humor or slapstick? Well, there wasn't much humor or slapstick, which is why my friend thought I shouldn't have won that contest. Of course, she might have also thought that because she thought she should have won that contest. But, there you go. Physical, your appearance and your body language. Now, you notice I wore a plaid shirt and blue jeans. And I used a little bit of a Southern accent because I'm not from Oklahoma, but I went to college in Oklahoma, spent 5.5 years there to get my 4-year degree. So I can pull off the Southern accent if I want to. And when you're a storyteller, a lot of times a Southern accent, a Southern American accent, goes right along with being a storyteller, at least in the States. I know we've got some international folks here, and I don't know. Is a Southern Japanese accent better than a Northern Japanese accent? If you're giving a tall tale, I'll let you all decide. Voice, flexibility, volume, that's just being a Toastmaster. Appropriateness. Was it appropriate to the audience? Did you have good grammar, pronunciation, and word selection? And the word selection kind of goes into what I was saying in terms of describing where he lived, describing the town, the county. That's where word choice can play a good part. So content, 30%, delivery with all those different aspects of delivery, still 55%. That's major. Language, 15%. All right. Yeah, oh, good. You're not counting Oz and grammar. That's good. So what is there anything on the judging form anybody wants to ask about in terms of maybe the speech you just saw or other contests you've seen in Tall Tales, or even a contest you've been judged in? Just raise your hand using the reaction button, or failing that, unmute yourself and shout. Got nothing. All right, that works. Can I give an example of a twist that is not surprising? Well, a twist by its very nature is surprising. I guess there could be a cinnamon twist that would not be surprising, but it would taste good. A twist that maybe instead of surprising yay, you could have a twist that is surprising dark, like my hero turned out to be an angel of death. That would be a twist. It wouldn't really be a happy ending for the poor Sally character, but yeah, that one's tough. A twist is going to be a surprise because that's the whole point of having a twist. Now, I meant to set this up earlier in the presentation, but we're going to have time, most likely, assuming I don't have sharing troubles again, to have you share your tall tales ideas, and I can give you some critique, some ideas to maybe help you if you're stuck, or maybe to enhance whatever it is you're doing. No full speeches, but maybe the kernel of what it is you're going to do. So if that's something you want to do, be prepared for that in maybe about 20 minutes, maybe less. We'll see. So humor. Humor wasn't in that speech so much, but yes, people may be expecting it. You don't know, because you don't know what the judges are thinking a tall tale is. A lot of people mistake a tall tale to be a humorous speech. And so they just want you to tell a 5 to 7 minute humorous speech in the 3 to 5 minutes you have for a tall tale. And if they aren't laughing, they may not vote for you. So you better be really good at what you're doing, or you better hope everybody else at least isn't as good as you if you're not going to use humor. Now, I don't know what the case was in mine. It might have simply been a judging error. What I do know is that if everybody votes for you to be the second best speaker, you've got a really good chance of winning, because they usually can't agree on who's first and who's third. And so you end up with the most points, because that's the way our ballot system works. But that's ballot theory, and I probably shouldn't get into judging ballot theory today, right, Elliot? Is that going to get me in trouble? All right. I've talked about, well, I've gone through most of my points here, and the next few points are going to come when you see the other speech, which I do have queued up. And the reason I did another speech 2 years later, when we had tall tales again, is because my friend accused me of not having a speech that should have won. So I thought, okay, I'm going to compete with a funny speech. I'll show you. So I took a speech that had been part of a humorous speech, not the whole thing, but it had been a kind of a short story in a humorous speech in 2003 in Utah. And that humorous speech won district. It's the only time I've won the humorous speech contest. I've tried multiple times, and it is, I firmly believe the humorous speech contest is the hardest to win, because nobody knows what a tall tale is, but also nobody really agrees on what's funny and what's not. So, yeah, what are you going to do there? So I took this little bit out of that humor speech, and then I expanded it into a 3 to 5 minute tall tale. And I will share that.
Our first contestant, Rich Hopkins. Rich Hopkins, the choice. The choice, Rich Hopkins. Have you ever had a bad day? I can guarantee you have never had as bad a day as Walter, because Walter woke up this morning dead. Opened his eyes to a white room with white curtains and white lights, and a man in a white robe, and off in the corner, a mysterious white elevator. Walter asked, "Are you St. Peter?" No, St. Peter's down the hall playing bingo. I'm Saint Ralph. I'm here to help you with your transition. Alrighty. Well, what's that elevator over there? That is going to take you to your final destination. You're going to go in, and it's either going to go up or down. At this point, Walter started to sweat and shake because he knew exactly where he was going to go. Walter was a very bad man. Ever since he was born, he was a criminal. He stole candy from babies, the other babies. As he grew up, he would steal lunch money and test answers and cars, and then he got into a little bit of cybercrime. In fact, he got so good at being bad that Nigerian scammers would send him their account information. Now, since he knew what would happen, he had this incredible fear of death. So he set up a life that would ensure that he would live forever. He ate only the healthiest of foods. Gluten-free, fat-free, carb-free, salt-free, which pretty much left him with kale. Lots and lots of kale. He had boiled kale, broiled kale, fried kale, baked kale, kale a la kale. And he worked out like a madman. He did hot yoga. He did Zumba. He did CrossFit. I did CrossFit once. Now you know why I walk this way. This lifestyle was extremely expensive. So once a month, he would go rob a bank just so he'd have enough money to keep it going. And on this fateful day, he robbed the first bank of Boulder, and the police ended up hot on his tail. And he took off up into the mountains and ended up on a windy, twisty, two-lane highway. And he didn't realize that just up ahead, around the corner, a Chiquita banana truck had just crashed with a giant 18-wheeler filled with Ben and Jerry's, creating what would later become known as the world's largest banana split. And then his car hit that slippery sweetness. It spun around and launched itself over the mountainside. And of course, he then woke up dead. Well, just as Walter was starting to give up hope, St. Ralph came over to give him the choice. Walter, you can get in that elevator and take your chances, or I will return you to your life on earth under one condition. You have to join Toastmasters. Now, that was not quite his biggest fear. And he ran to that elevator, and it went up, and then it went down. And it sped its way down, and red lights started to flash. And as the doors began to open, smoke poured in. And he then saw at the back of the room a banner. Brimstone Toastmasters, Club number 666. Welcome, Walter. You've arrived just in time for table topping.
Oh, I do love that speech. Now, that was funny, wasn't it? I kept seeing you guys laugh on the screen at least. So I went for a funny speech, and yes, it did win. And it not only did it win, it won from first position out of 6 speeches. So for all of those who say, oh, you don't want to get first position, sure you do. Just set the tone, set the bar high, and hope. A lot of hope. But I did things in that speech that you want to do in your tall tale, perhaps. You notice I didn't wear jeans this time. I wore an outfit that complemented where the speech was going to go. The red shirt for the fiery death, the black suit pants, the black suspenders, just to give it a little bit of showmanship. I used different voices, the voice at the end that gave it that overpowering crescendo to get people to they just couldn't handle that ending. And that worked that way when it was part of the humor speech 20 years earlier. So you gotta test things, know what works, know what doesn't. But the humor in that speech was consistent. It was every 10 to 15 seconds. Some people will tell you need to have humor every 7 seconds. I think that's a little bit over the top. But if you can get people laughing, yeah, they're going to like you more. People laugh when they're enjoying you. They start to build a trust in you. And you're going to get higher judging scores almost every time if you make them laugh, as long as you do the other aspects. Your content's good, you're organized, you follow up with good speech. I had good descriptions, I had good language, imagery with the biggest banana split ever between the Ben and Jerry's ice cream and the banana truck. Describing what he was eating, the exercises he did, being very specific. So I did a lot of things in this speech that I did not do in the other speech, but they both worked. And it's the same district, same audience, essentially, just 2 years difference. Elliot, you've got a question.
I not only have a question, but I also had a wonderful commentary on that speech compared to the first one. You are so right about the importance of humor. I believe in your first workshop, you said humor made the difference between sometimes winning or not winning. And I'm so glad that you mentioned one of the reasons you said that the humor actually likened you to the audience. And then you said they made them trust you. You know, that might be. And so that was one question that I had out there. But the other question, of course, is that some people don't think they're funny. Funny is in the eyes of the beholder. But you are naturally funny, Rich. So the question, of course, is whether or not you're natural or not, you think humor is still a very important element to any contest speech. And I tend to agree. What do you think?
Well, I think humor is very important. And I make sure that I use humor as often as I can. That's why I wrote 2 books on how to use humor in speeches. And those books are full of humorous speeches, written by other people that they've analyzed and I've analyzed for their use of humor. In the first book, I was dumb. I didn't include one of my own speeches. In the second book, I did include one of my speeches. I include It's Gotta Be the Shoes, which I included not because it was incredibly funny, but because it had subtle humor that could still be effective. And so it worked as a speech to analyze. And in terms of trusting, I know it sounds weird that if people are laughing that they're trusting you. Well, people, if they don't know who you are, they're kind of taken aback and they're not sure if they should laugh. So you have to kind of give them permission to laugh. And that is in the type of humor you use and how you deliver it. Maybe you kind of laugh or at least smile a bit when you give the line. And then you're building that trust connection with them, building that bridge, and they're able to laugh for the rest of the speech, which you really want to have happen. There's also an old maxim that says that the moment after an audience laughs is the best time to teach them something, because they are completely connected with you and will remember what that next point is. I'm kind of checking out the chat a little bit. So costuming is a big part. in neither of those did I use props. I'm not a big fan of using props, but most of that is because I could barely walk on stage myself, much less try to carry a bunch of other stuff with me. Other people I've seen use props. You tell them a fish story, wear fisherman outfit, bring on a what do you call that? A cat fishing pole. I'm getting old. You're at the beach, carry a beach ball. I don't know. You can have props as long as they don't get in the way or distract. They've got to add to whatever it is you're talking about. Just like your costuming needs to add to whatever it is you're talking about. Now, sometimes, like the outfit I wore didn't distract people from the speech and then helped punctuate at the end. But if you're trying to use a costume as a surprise, you don't want to have it on the entire time. You may want to have it be some sort of coat you put on, or maybe it's something underneath what you're wearing so that you can put it away again. If you don't need the prop after you show the prop, get rid of the prop. If I wanted to tell you I was really a superhero, then I just, show you that I'm the Flash. But then I'd go back to my secret identity. There are ways to do it. Thomas Lindemann had a Superman shirt under his suit in the 2006 World Championship of Public Speaking. And he gave the speech about flying, having all that power. And then he revealed that shirt about 2/3 of the way through his speech. It was very effective. A lot of people remember it. A lot of people don't, because 2006 was a long, long time ago. But we won't talk about that. All right. Let's do some coaching here. Does anybody have a tall tale idea, a tall tale that they're giving, a tall tale question? We've still got, I'm thinking, what do we got? 5-10 minutes to stay on time?
Yes, at least that long. We could, depending on your time, we could go for another 20 minutes if we
I
want.
can do that. My family all left the house. I don't care. Of course, that's going to be up to the crowd here.
Herman's already raised.
Interactive.
Herman's already raised his hand. He's got the tall tale.
See, I can't see him because I'm spotlighted. Let me go to gallery.
Yeah, you want to hear my tall tale, Rich? Here's
I would love to hear the idea of your tall tale as opposed to 3 to 5 minutes of your tall tale.
I just put it on the chat.
Okay. My car broke down and we pitched a tent on the side of the road, not realizing it was on an anthill. The ants came and they were real big. They are from Mars, arrived on SpaceX. Ooh, and we're talking. They had a chip in their brain, and they tried to plant a chip in my brain, but I begged and I was able to escape. All right, you got a lot of good stuff in there. I mean, it starts off believable enough. Camping, pitching a tent, ants are there. Then you get to go into the unbelievable, the exaggeration. The question is, what's the climax? What's the payoff? Because escaping isn't necessarily a payoff, but maybe getting them convinced that they should take you back to Mars and you become their supreme leader would be a big payoff. Or you use the ants and their brain chips, they become your army, and they implant chips in people all around the world, and you take over Earth as supreme ruler of Earth. Now, I've got this in my head. Supreme ruler is important. But if you can go bigger, 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 as opposed to, whew, I got away, which is kind of a, we're glad you got away, but it could have been cooler than that, Herman. Come on. Be cooler. That's what Tall Tales is all about, is getting bigger and bigger, taller and taller, if you can. Any questions on that?
I tried to tell that a little ant became my friend, and when the big ants came with a drill to plant a chip in my head, I struggled, and the little ant comes and transports me from the ant hill to the road side of the road. And I said,
so the ant saves you,
the little ant saves me.
and the two of you live happily ever after?
Kind of. I said, thank you, ant. And she said, that's what friends are for. And that's the end of it. In 3 minutes, you can only tell so much.
That's right. Well, that can become a bit of a moral tale, and in terms of creating a friendship and having that friend be creating some sort of connection. So you can go that route too, the way I did with Gotta Be the Shoes. So whatever you do, just be very intentional with it and sell it for exactly what it is. So if it is kind of an emotional, moral ending, make sure you make me feel it. I want to feel the friendship. Otherwise, I want to feel the power. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Marsha, did you have one?
Sure. I didn't have a story. I just have an idea. Actually, a thought more than the tall tale. I was wondering, is it better to be completely truthful and keep building on the exaggeration, or is it okay to do like how Herman did in his story? Which is better?
Well, usually starting with a kernel of truth is a good beginning for a tall tale. Even Herman's speech started with something that could be true. He stopped on the side of the road, pitched a tent, and there were ants. That happens. Alien ants don't tend to happen. At least we don't hear about it that often. So starting off with the truth and then building there. If the entire story is the truth, it's hard to make it exaggerated enough and stay the truth. You really, by using exaggeration, are going to move it off the truth. And for tall tales, to me, that's the whole point, is to make it bigger than the truth. So there's truth, but then it's amplified.
Like a story.
I'm sorry?
Then it's like a story then, right?
Yeah, tall tales is essentially storytelling, much
Like
more so than the humorous contest.
So it's like a fictional story.
Typically it can start with a non-fictional story that then turns fictional.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Harry, you had your hand up.
After Elliot or before?
I saw you first.
Go ahead, Harry.
Okay, getting back to Herman's, would it be workable to go back to SpaceX and tie it to Elon Musk and Twitter and make something global out of that?
That is something that can be done, and depending on how you do it, could work. It could also be very dangerous because Elon Musk is a bit divisive right now. And getting involved in politics and those types of things could create problems with your audience and with your judges. So if you're going to do that, try to stay in the realm of humor and not in the realm of politics. But I could see it going that way. Elliot, I'm going to mute myself and cough, but I'm going to listen to your question.
Okay, thank you very much. As long as your coughing isn't part of my joke. Anyway, I actually gave a sample of a Tall Tales story to the club last couple of weeks ago, and a few of them were there. I wanted to show them a sample of that because my pet peeve, as I mentioned to you at the first workshop I went to, everybody thought a tall tale has to be some alien coming and kidnapping somebody, et cetera, et cetera. But I noticed that many of your stories were credible ones, you know, shoes and fire and all of the above. So, but my story, I sort of make it credible and updated. I said that I went to this tech conference and I went into this AR or a VR booth where I'm plugged into the experience of becoming Beyonce, Queen Elizabeth. I go to Tahiti, wherever I want. But since I bought this really huge flash drive where I could download stuff, I decided that I would download a whole bunch of the clutter that was in my brain, put it on this flash drive, and I would be able to operate so much freely. Well, what happened was, after I downloaded all the stuff into my little flash drive, when I came out of the booth, my purse was snatched. And there went my memory. I did not know who I was. And the only thing I had in my pocket was this flyer for this Tall Tales at Study Groups Toastmaster. I went to them and asked them, do you know who I am? Because I don't. You know,
That's great.
At the end of the story, I was saying, uh-oh, this is a Tall Tale story. I'm a little afraid of what you'll tell me, that I was a nymphomaniac, you know, coming here to get free beer or something like that. But, you know, I entered that at a Tall Tales contest years ago, and I lost it to a story about someone who had a bear during a camping trip that scared everybody. Ho hum. It was a camping story about a bear. I feel for you, Rich, when you told me you lost to a camping and a bear story. So
Yeah, it happens. And one of the reasons it happens is that judges are more used to the familiarity of a bear story or a fish story, even an aliens story, whereas yours was, I defragmented my brain, which is a great idea, but they may not have been ready for it. And I think now people would be more ready for it than they were way back when you told it the first time. It's just, we're more tech savvy. Of course, you're in Silicon Valley, right? So they should have been tech savvy enough way back when too. So, but then you've got the other aspects. You've got delivery. You know, how was your delivery? I have no idea. I know you're better today than you were then, because you have to be, because it was a long time ago. And so you've done that many more speeches and you're that much better. And that could very well be why I lost at division in 2003 and then won at district in 2018. You know, 15 years can do quite a bit with presentation skills. The other risk that both you and I took in those Tall Tales is we talked about Toastmasters. And some judges, the minute you talk about Toastmasters, will mark you down because they'll call it pandering. You're pandering to the audience. Now, this happens more in the international speech contest, although we've had some world champions win talking about Toastmasters. I can't remember her name. Ramona Smith. She talked all about Toastmasters contests and what Toastmasters did for her, and she won the world championship. I'm watching her speech going, what is she doing? She's talking about Toastmasters her whole speech. The judges are going to hate her. And then she wins. You just never know. Year to year, contest to contest, what's going to work. So if you're going to mention Toastmasters, be aware of the risk and be careful about how you do it. And you might have better luck at different levels, because you were talking about coming back to your club. So your club, it might have worked better than it would have worked at a higher level. So something to think about. Anybody else have, there we go. Sheriff.
Hey, Rich. I have a Tall Tales idea that involves me coming onto the stage as multiple characters. So at first, I'll be presenting as one character. Then I'll be speaking as one character to the audience, and then it's kind of like I'm narrating a conversation between people. So I have to like switch to some other character and say like what that character spoke about. And like I have to switch back and forth between these things. So one of the ways I'm thinking of doing this is like wearing a glass, like when I'm speaking as one character, and then like taking off the glass when I'm speaking as the other character. And then like I don't know what I'm going to do for the other characters. Like there are multiple characters in the thing. So I'm just wondering, is this a good idea? Like for Tall Tales, what are the challenges you think I'll face, and like are there other ways I can like differentiate between a character and another character?
Right. Well, the challenge with multiple characters is how can the audience keep track of who the characters are? How will you be able to differentiate them? And will you have too many? You know, I had St. Ralph and I had the main character, Willie, I think. I change his name every time I give that speech. And then in the other one, you know, I just had Sally and I had our hero. I had some firemen later on, but they weren't really characters. They were just there. So if you start getting into different characters, they need to all be important enough to be there. And they need to be different enough if you're having a discussion in how they talk, language-wise. You know, if you can use accents, I don't know if you have the ability to do accents other than the one you naturally possess, but that can be helpful as well. Costume changes usually don't have time, like if you're trying to put on a coat or a hat, but glasses can be good differentiating. And I've seen people do 3 or 4 characters with 3 or 4 types of glasses, and the glasses become the anchor for that character. So it is possible. It just gets complicated. And when you get complicated in a 3 to 5 minute speech, you get risky.
Is it a good idea to like, you know, come onto the stage and say like, introduce the characters first or something like that? You first say like, if I wear the glass and this, if I wear the other glass and that, or something like that. Is that a good idea? Or
I would not do that because it takes time away from the speech as a whole. And you want to come into the speech in the story. You don't want to narrate. You know, when you try to set it up as a narrator, we're disengaged. Whereas if you come up and start right into a story, you can engage us that way. And then just have the glasses and be the one person, take them off. Maybe this character doesn't have glasses that you're talking to. And you know, you're this way for one talking, you're this way for the other talking. You don't even have to move that much on stage. You can just pivot and move 3/4 one way or the other. And then if you have a third character, you might want to move a step or two to one side to differentiate where that character is.
thanks, Rich. Thanks.
You bet. Anybody else?
Don't be shy. They're
Destiny,
shy.
thank you for
Be
going
shy.
on screen.
Okay. Destiny, do you have one of your tall tales? She's thinking about it.
Hi. Yeah, I've been thinking of it since our last meeting of something, but for some reason I'm having trouble making it so that it's like something that can happen. So I'll exaggerate something, I'll make something really crazy, but I'm sure somebody would be like, that's actually a possible thing to happen. And I just can't like bring myself to like think of something so incredible, like something that could never happen. So I'm like getting stuck there.
Well, anything can always happen. What idea is the one you like the most that you think will bother people?
Well, I was thinking of telling a story of me going to Vietnam. So I'm half Vietnamese and I'm going to go visit my family there, but I don't know how to speak it. And so I'm nervous of going. And then I have this, like, I'm trying to learn it, but I can't get the pronunciation down. I'm too old to learn a new language. And so I just end up having to go visiting family, and then eventually my parents just leave me there to learn, and I have to learn in the country. And I'm like, please let me go back home. And they go, you can't come back until you speak it. And then eventually I get so fluent that I'm teaching kids how to speak Vietnamese in Vietnam and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's like, oh, well, you could really do that if you just went and worked on it. So I don't know.
Okay, I can see what you're talking about there. That is believable. It's certainly possible. What if you learned how to speak Vietnamese magically? What if you went on a hike while you were there because you were so frustrated that you couldn't communicate with anybody? You just had to get away. And you found this bizarrely carved totem and picked it up. And suddenly you found yourself speaking and understanding fluent Vietnamese. And then not only did you become a teacher of all the kids, but you became supreme ruler of, I'm all into supreme ruler, but you could do some things with that just by taking one aspect of it and making it fantastical. It becomes a tall tale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know it's tough because you're thinking, well, I'm telling a true story, but then I'm making it not believable. Well, that's the point. So, maybe someday you could tell that speech as international speech if you do make it come true. Anybody else? Or do we need to wrap up?
Facilitator.
Does anybody have any more questions? We do have a few more minutes.
So should we make this into a Q&A part? Do anybody have questions that deal with the thing as well? Yeah. So if you don't have questions, of course, I always have questions, but I don't want to grab the microphone. Hopefully I will speak on behalf of everybody. For example, it's something new that you said today, Rich, that I didn't hear you before. You said to be very careful that the audience just a little bit more cynical, a little bit more critical. I have a feeling that might be true. What do you think? Your audience is a little bit.
Well, I said it, so I think it's true.
Yeah. For example, I could see Destiny was saying, I don't want to go out there and just get eaten alive by the audience and go, that is not even a tall tale. That's not even funny, or that's not even incredible. You see what I mean? I can see where everybody's afraid to say anything, but so something that you could say to help us just get over this very, very hostile audience, possibly,
Well, know your audience and know what the audience is expecting. They're expecting something different in Tall Tales than they're expecting in the International Speech Contest. Even different than what's in the humorous contest. The problem is they don't necessarily know what they're expecting. And the judges don't always know what they're expecting. So, you could say that in any contest, that you don't know what one judge versus another judge is going to think of what you're saying. But you can tend to have a better baseline in any other contest than Tall Tales. Because you could have a judge just say, well, that's too over the top for Tall Tales, and I just don't like it at all. You could have people say, oh, it's too truthful. It could actually happen, like Destiny was saying, and they don't, you just got to go with something you're enjoying. Go with a story you like to tell that is going to be memorable. Maybe it's going to be humorous. Maybe it's going to be emotional. Maybe it's going to have a really good point. Maybe you're just going to enjoy doing it. And then see where the ballots fall. Because that's the only control you can really have. Is it Sheriff or Sharif, or is Sheriff a fake title in your, because you got a sheriff behind you. So I don't know.
Yeah, share is a fake title. So I had another question about so like PowerPoint presentations are one of my favorite tools. Like I use them in one of my speeches, and I really like using them. Have you seen anyone use a PowerPoint presentation in a tall tale speech, and how does that usually go? And I was thinking, yeah, or let you answer the first question first. I have one more. Yeah.
You talking about PowerPoint presentations?
Yeah. Can someone use a PowerPoint presentation in a tall tales, or has someone used one before?
I have never seen it done. Can they? Of course they can. Should they? That's always the question. I've seen some people use PowerPoint in other contests, and they use it really effectively. But even when it's used effectively, sometimes judges don't like it. Sometimes they'll actually count speakers who don't use something like that a little bit higher because they aren't using something like that. They're just being speakers. But then you have the judges that are thinking, wow, look at how he or she managed that PowerPoint in that situation, whether you're in person or hybrid. But, if you're not going to be able to use PowerPoint in person very well for hybrid contests, you would really want to stay online on Zoom and let the people at home or in person see it on the screen, because it's going to be, I don't know how you would share a PowerPoint on Zoom at the same time that you were doing it in person. So that creates an extra situation of complexity. For me, I would never use PowerPoint, but that's me. Other people are a lot better at it than I am. I can't even share the judges sheet without getting help.
Okay. Maybe I'm coming back to the same question again and again, but can I use PowerPoint to do something like I just have single slide and I have photos of all the characters. So one character is wearing a glass and another character is not wearing a glass and some other character is doing something else. You have all the photos of all the characters on that like slide, and that helps like audience anchor to those characters and not get confused when you switch between those characters. Is that a good idea? I've seen like character indexes at the ends of books and things like that.
Sure.
We'll try.
I don't think in terms of good ideas and bad ideas. I think in terms of, did the idea work? Which means do it somewhere and see if it works. If it doesn't work, then it's a bad idea. If it works, then it's a good idea. The question is the first time you do it, do you want it to be in a contest?
Okay.
Anybody else?
Anyone else have any questions? All right,
Well, I do want to make a closing statement, if you don't mind.
go ahead.
I have, as was talked about, been in 152 now since I wrote that particular bio, 152 contests in all categories. I have won some contests that I probably should have lost. I have lost some contests that I firmly believe I should have won. But hey, what are you going to do? We don't see the judges' forms. Now more than ever, we have no clue who the judges even are. We just have to go out there and give it our best. Do what we believe in, make the decisions on our speeches that we want to make. Yeah, get a coach, get advice, have a club look at it and give you feedback. But ultimately, the only person on stage is you. The only person that has control of anything is you, and that is your performance. How you feel about what you've delivered. Not how you feel about whether you got the trophy, but how you feel about the message you delivered, the performance you gave. That's something you can control. And in Tall Tales, more than any other speech, I think, just go out there and have fun, because it's fun. Speaking is fun in general, but Tall Tales, it's super fun. And you can become a supreme commander if you really want to. Elise, thank you.